This is an ABC podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's Health Report with me, Norman Swan.
And me, Tegan Taylor.
Today, snake bites. What to do and what not to do.
Okay. Oh.
Damn.
Did he bite you?
I think so.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, I got him.
Hang on, you've been bitten.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Really sorry. All right. First aid. Yeah, you got me.
Yeah, got me. When we find out what happens next later on in the Health Report. You'll also find out how doctors are betraying their Hippocratic Oath, top to bottom and side to side, and what it means for all of us.
And it's a disease we've lived with for millennia, and it causes hundreds of thousands of deaths every year, the majority in children under 5. I'm talking about malaria, and last week saw a milestone in the fight against the mosquito-borne illness as the World Health Organization recommended broad use for the first vaccine against it. The RTSS malaria vaccine targets one of 5 strains of the parasites that cause malaria, P. falciparum, the most common strain in sub-Saharan Africa. It's an imperfect vaccine. It's given in 4 doses across 18 months, and it's only 30 to 40% effective. But the scale of malaria means it's still predicted to save the lives of tens of thousands of babies and young children each year, depending on how well it can be rolled out. So here to talk about the implications for this vaccine is Leanne Robinson, who studies vector-borne diseases, including malaria, at the Burnet Institute. Welcome, Leanne.
Hello. So we've been pretty spoilt this last year or so. We've had multiple highly effective COVID vaccines developed in months. I think it's spoilt us for what usually goes into making a vaccine. This vaccine for malaria has been 30 years in the making. It falls pretty far short of the WHO target, which was for a 75% effective first-generation malaria vaccine. Why is it so hard to make a good malaria vaccine?
Yeah, thanks, Tegan. I think it's really important to emphasise, as you said, the Plasmodium parasite, it's a complex organism. There are 5 different strains and this vaccine targets one of them. And it's a multicellular organism that interacts with 2 hosts, the mosquito and the human. And it expresses a really large number and a high diversity of surface proteins. And these are different between the different forms of malaria. And so if we do compare with something that everybody's, pretty familiar with now in terms of COVID, the vaccines for which have been developed, really rapidly, but they've been developed specifically using one key protein that the virus relies upon. Whereas malaria parasites have a whole suite of proteins that they can essentially choose between to successfully invade host cells, replicate and cause disease. But then I think the other thing that, does have to be taken into account a little bit when we consider that this is a major milestone that partners have been working on for more than 30 years is that, again, in comparison to something like COVID, where we've seen many vaccines developed very rapidly, the high interest and motivation from some pharmaceutical companies and governments just hasn't been there to the same level for malaria. A disease which largely affects populations living in low and middle income countries. So I think with all that in mind, the recent endorsement for the first ever malaria vaccine really is an important milestone for high burden countries in sub-Saharan Africa.
Right, and when you have those, you're saying high burden countries, they're countries that often have healthcare systems that aren't structured the way they are. In countries like Australia, it's one thing to have a vaccine, it's an amazing thing to have a vaccine. It's another thing to actually get it into the people who need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's really where the WHO recommendation is based on these results from an ongoing pilot program in 3 countries in Africa that has really seen the vaccine implemented and given through the health system to more than 800,000 children. And it has demonstrated that despite the modest efficacy, it's feasible and cost effective to deliver in high risk areas. And when we consider that in these settings, we're talking about hundreds of children under 5 dying from malaria every day. what is a modest efficacy of 30%, still means, an additional tool that can provide a 30% reduced risk of severe illness or death and greatly complement existing interventions that are really the mainstay of malaria control, such as long-lasting insecticide-treated nets and indoor residual spraying and effective case management.
So all of those things stay in addition to this vaccine. It's particularly important for places where kids can't get medical help really quickly if they do catch malaria.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think even within endemic countries, we have to recognise that the majority of the burden is borne by rural populations that are often perhaps poorer and have less access even to program-delivered malaria control tools. So this vaccine would really be providing in those settings a safety net or a layered approach where, in addition to hopefully benefiting from sleeping underneath bed nets, in addition from hopefully getting access to prompt treatment for fever when they experience it, these children would have an additional safety net of protection from a vaccine that could prevent that malaria episode from becoming really severe and causing their death.
So you mentioned before just how complex it is. It's really complex. The parasites differ between species, but is this a step forward to vaccines for, say, the strains that our Pacific neighbours live with?
Yeah, I think we would certainly hope so. This, as we've said, it's the first ever malaria vaccine. I think it's widely considered to be a first generation vaccine, and it will absolutely teach us a lot, not only about how to make an effective vaccine, and there's a considerable amount of effort and investment continuing globally in understanding how to achieve higher protective efficacy, not only with this vaccine, but with other vaccine candidates, as well as how to take them through the pipeline of trials required to demonstrate safety and efficacy. But there's also an opportunity to take advantage of rapid advances that we've seen, yield enormous benefits in terms of mRNA vaccines to try and achieve longer lasting protection, not only for, as you say, falciparum malaria, but vivax malaria. Countries in our region, have a dual burden of falciparum and vivax. And so, whilst a vaccine that can prevent severe illness and death from falciparum, may still be something that countries in our region are interested in, it's not going to solve the malaria problem for them.
So one of the things we've heard a lot about this past year is vaccine hesitancy. Just briefly, what's the attitude towards this new vaccine in the communities that need it?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Tegan. Although the implementation studies have demonstrated in those three countries that the vaccine is well accepted, a critical next step really must be ensuring strong preparatory activities to ensure communication and awareness is optimised to maximise uptake and to even, really work with communities around what that would take. We know, as you say, that we feel it more acutely than ever right now, that even a highly efficacious public health tool is only effective in the community if they're well accepted. And this will be important for this vaccine in order to maximise the chance to turn a moderate protective efficacy into real-world effectiveness.
Leanne, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Professor Leanne Robinson is Program Director of Health Security and Group Leader for Vector-borne Diseases and Tropical Public Health at the Burnet Institute.
Thanks, Tegan. You're listening to RN's Health Report. Now, if you're a regular listener, you'd know that the last thing we do in the Health Report is spruik the latest new medical gadget or treatment, and we do try to be sober and evidence-informed. We try to respect the adage that sometimes doing nothing is the best thing to do. But according to a new book, that doesn't often happen out there in the real world of medicine. It claims that doctors are betraying their Hippocratic Oath all the time. Sometimes they know they are, but often they don't. The result is harm, enormous waste, and lost opportunities to invest in care that works. The book's called Hypocrisy, and its authors are Professors Rochelle Buchbinder and Ian Harris. Rochelle is a rheumatologist and researcher at Monash University and the Cabrini Hospital. Ian is an orthopaedic surgeon and researcher at the University of New South Wales. Welcome back to the Health Report, both.
Thank you.
Now, you quote at the beginning of the book a new version of a relatively modern version of the Hippocratic Oath, and I'll just quote bits of it. It's not the Greek version. One is, I will apply for the benefit of the sick all measures which are required, avoiding those twin traps of overtreatment and therapeutic nihilism. I will remember that there's an art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife or the chemist's drug. I will remember that I do not treat a fever chart, a cancerous growth, but a sick human being whose illness may affect the person's family and economic stability. My responsibility includes these related problems if I am to care adequately for the sick. I will prevent disease whenever I can. For prevention is preferable to cure. I will remember that I remain a member of society with special obligations to all my fellow human beings, those sound of mind and body as well as the infirm. So, I mean, it goes on, so I'm only taking part of it. I mean, let's just go through this. I mean, this is the benchmark for your book, I take it.
Exactly, yeah, that's what we centred the book around. So each chapter is a pledge of the oath. And so there's 10 chapters for 10 pledges. And it was amazing. I mean, we wanted to write a book on overdiagnosis, overtreatment, too much medicine. And we didn't realise how well the Hippocratic Oath fitted. And once we read it, we thought, wow, the book's going to sort of write itself around these oaths.
Rochelle, talk to me about the twin traps of overtreatment and therapeutic nihilism.
So, the overtreatment, we see the problems of overtreatment in our everyday practices, both of us, and it involves treating people where the treatment is not going to benefit them and might harm them, as well as over-medicalisation of things that are just part of normal life that we overtreat and overdiagnose.
So give me some examples.
So things like ageing, pre-hypertension, sarcopenia, which is, weak muscles that you get as you age. These are grief, sadness. So these are examples of normal parts of life that in some instances we've over-medicalised and opened them up to treatment or medicalisation.
I mean, Ian, as a surgeon, therapeutic nihilism, I mean, pancreatic cancer to me is an interesting example. While Rochelle's talking about overtreatment there, if you've got pancreatic cancer, you do better, you do far better. In fact, you can live much longer if you simply go to a centre where they're used to dealing with pancreatic cancer, and they're not nihilistic. In other words, they actually, when people are not used to treating pancreatic cancer, they undertreat rather than overtreat. And you'd think that they would overtreat, and you're better going to a centre where they actually know when to operate and when not.
Yeah, that's right. There's lots of examples where if you go to a treatment place that has more experience or perhaps a more multidisciplinary care, you will get better care. I mean, cancer care has changed enormously since I started medicine. It's now a multidisciplinary thing where people from different fields of cancer, radiation, surgery, medicine, all get together and work out the best thing for this patient. Whereas before, if you went to see a radiation oncologist, you got radiation. If you went to see a surgeon, you got surgery. And so the treatment for cancer has improved a lot, but there's still a lot of over-treatment in cancer and mistreatment as well.
Which is where, Rochelle, the business of medicine comes in. I mean, you talk about the new oncology drugs that have come in at huge expense with very small benefit.
Yes, I think that there is a lot of treatments that are expensive